Hi there! I'm Gesa Pickbrenner, jewelry artist and 3D designer, and in today's video I'm going to help you demystify one of Blender's most powerful and sometimes most intimidating tools, curves. Curves are ideal to make any kind of elongated smooth shape in Blender, including hair, pipes, limbs, tentacles, and nice jewelry wire and ornaments. Add curves like any other object with Shift-A. I have a lot of objects here, which are part of the extra objects add-on, which you can also enable, but they are not necessary for this class. So, add curves like any other object with Shift-A. There you have lots of options. However, the curves I like to use the most are Bezier curve and circle, as well as path. Let's first create a Bezier curve. All curves are different to meshes as they initially don't have any geometry. They are like empty paths floating in the 3D air. Since they don't have any geometry, they are not visible in the rendering at this stage. In all curves, we can switch from Object to Edit mode with Tab, and then you can move the control points around with G. The curve will follow. To add some geometry to this curve, you can go into the Curve menu under Geometry and give it some bevel depth. The standard profile is round, and we will explore the others later. Now this geometry will be visible in the renderings. Let's switch to flat shading by right-clicking on the curve and shade flat so that we can see the individual segments better. I also switch to Matcap in the 3D shading settings and turn on Cavity, which will make things even more accentuated and clear. This new geometry won't have super high resolution, and we can change that in two different ways. You can increase the resolution of the profile of the curve, which in this case is just round, so a circle. By going here and increase the resolution, you can just click and drag, and this will increase the overall roundness of the curve. You may notice that the resolution along the length is also a bit low, so we can see these individual joints here, and we can increase that under Active Spline. And if you increase the resolution here, the curvature will become much more smooth. And there we can also switch between flat and smooth shading directly. So in Edit mode, we can work a bit more with this curve. We can, for example, use E to extrude segments. You can also select a portion, duplicate it with Shift-D, and then move it somewhere else. If you want to connect these two, select the endpoints and press F. Also, you can select two or more control points and subdivide them by right-clicking and choosing Subdivide. If you want to get rid of those extra subdivision points again, which you can also use to change the shape even more, then you can just press X and say Dissolve Vertices. The curve will stay connected, even if you choose Delete Vertices. If you delete a segment, the curve will get discontinued, and you can connect it again with F. You can also scale the individual control points with S and rotate them with R. So since this is a Bezier curve, they have some handles on the individual vertices or control points. And you can select these handles and move them about. And this will make the curvature more dramatic or less so. Usually they both move in alignment to each other, like one straight stick. When hitting V or right-clicking, you can choose different versions of handles.
Automatic will actually convert the handles into a tangent of the curve, which will always keep a constant curvature, no matter how you move the control point.
Vector will make the handles point towards the next control point, even when moving this one. But it will not keep a curvature, it will just become a very pointy corner. Aligned is the standard. The handles are aligned to each other and do not change position when moving.
Using aligned, you are able to influence the shape and direction much more than with the first two options.
Then there is free. If you want sharp or smooth corners and the most bit of control, you should use free, since this allows you to move the handles independently of each other, and they won't change their placement when you move the curve. Toggle free align lets you switch quickly between free and aligned. Another important feature of curves is to be found in the N menu. If you select a control point, you can scale the thickness of the control point under radius. You can also do this with the shortcut Alt-S or Option-S for Mac users. Then another cool feature is the tilt value. The tilt value lets you turn the surface. For this I will go back to shade flat so that you can see that better. And this is of course especially interesting if we would like to change the shape of the curve, for example when going to geometry and set this to extrude, and if you tilt it, it will just give it a very interesting shape. And you can do that with individual control points or all of them at once. You can also offset the curve from its placement if you need that at some point. I usually keep that at 0 so that the control points are directly below the curve. Now, of course, the ornaments shouldn't be all around. You already know that you can use the extrude function to give this a stretched look, but you can also go to the bevel option, and there we have some more potential profile shapes that we can give our curve. The standard setting is the round setting, and you can change the depth and the resolution. You can also select fill caps to close the end caps. You can also switch to profile. This way you can influence the shape a bit more. I will just increase the resolution like I did before under active spline, like that. Think of this straight line as 1/4 of the cross-section of the curve. Here. So that is this line here. You can only see this part here. If you now adjust that, you can see that you can influence the whole shape in this way. And that of course gives us interesting options to play with the shape of the curve. You can add some more points. Also, you can change the control points here, just as you can with the curve. So you can choose aligned or free, or just this pointy vector end. And of course, you can always tilt and twist and turn or give this another radius. The third option for bevel shapes is object. If you select this, first everything vanishes because we don't yet have an object plugged in here. But this is where you can really be the most creative. So we can use another object as the profile for the curve. So let's do that. In object mode, create a new circle. Make it a bit smaller, bring it over here. And now we will call this bevel object. And then we can plug this into bevel for our curve. And already here this is a little bit too huge, so we can scale down the circle. Then if we change the circle in edit mode, like that for example, we can influence the whole shape of our curve. And of course we can play around with this a lot. We can make the handles free so that we can, for example, give this a little drop shape. This can be quite useful for hair because you can even duplicate some areas and put them on top of each other, remember with Shift D, and then this could look like strands of hair if you make that small enough. So you don't only have to have one curve, you can create multiple curves as part as this one. And then they can float next to each other and it will look like that. And here, of course, you can always change the tilt and the radius and just play around with all these options. Okay, so that would be another way of playing with this profile of the curve. And you can already see that this differs quite a bit from the standard round boring thing that you get in the beginning. Beside the Bezier curve, there are some other curve options. So you could go to Shift A and choose curve, and we could, for example, choose a Nurbs curve. Let's move that a little bit out of the way. So a Nurbs curve is a little bit different to a Bezier curve, since you can see when you move these control points, there's this little curve. Let's give this a little bevel so that we can see it better. So if you move these control points, the curve approximates the placement, and you can press E and then the curve will follow, and you can make it follow these control points. So you don't control the curve as directly as with the handles, but the advantage is here that it is pretty much guaranteed that you always get a nice curvy shape. Whereas with the Bezier, you can sometimes, if you toggle it to free, of course, you can mess up your nice curve. Okay, so this is the Nurbs curve, and you may notice that the end of the curve does not align with this last endpoint. So then we have the path. And let's move that here, go to edit mode, and also give it some depth. The path is very similar to the Nurbs curve. You can see that it also follows the control points. It approximates the position between them, but the endpoints align with the curve. So you directly influence where the endpoint is placed. However, you can go to the Nurbs curve and go to active spline, and then you can go to endpoint, and this will basically make the Nurbs curve into a path because now the endpoints are aligned with the control points. So the path and the Nurbs curve are very similar in functionality, and really it is up to you which one you prefer and which one you want to use. So these are the three basic curve types. So you have the Nurbs curve, the path, and you have the Bezier curve, which behaves a little bit differently, and you have a little bit more control over the overall shape through these handles. And of course, you can also give these different profiles, which works just the same as with the Bezier curve. So you can also use the same bevel object, and it will have the same effect, which is pretty neat. So you can influence the shape of multiple curves with one bevel object without having to create a new one each time. Just make sure that your bevel object is a nice curve that you can just park somewhere around here.
One final thing about curves, you can change the start and end point mapping of them here. This is a neat little function often used in animation to grow all kind of wires, tentacles and such stuff. You can catch a glimpse of it in action in my intro slide.
Thanks so much for watching! If you're ready to dive deeper and apply what you've learned here, check out my full Skillshare class where we'll put these curve techniques to work on a beautiful ring project. And if you're looking for more personalized help, I also offer one-on-one sessions to work with you directly on all your Blender design needs. So go ahead, explore curves, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!